Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're coming in from. This is your boy Josh. We are on the Cards Companion main page. Thank you so much for viewing in, taking some time out of your day. We greatly appreciate it. We have a great friend of the show here. We have Ethan Moore with us today. Ethan, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Josh, for that. Thanks for having me. Excited to be on.
Awesome. Yeah, it's going to be a fun little show. We're going to do that thing that we do sometimes. We're going to talk about college football, but not really talk about college football. It's one of my favorite types of shows.
Let's
Thank you
do
so
it.
much. Cool. Awesome. So I guess the first thing I wanted to talk to you about, Ethan, I wanted to bring up is this new Notre Dame Clemson scheduling agreement. Something about that. What were your initial thoughts when you saw that? Because I know it's a little weird because theoretically Notre Dame already has that scheduling gear with the ACC.
Yeah, I like it, Josh, to be honest with you, man. I think it's one of these kind of cutting edge deals that will help the ACC brand overall. Of course, I would love for Louisville to hog, Notre Dame and get them on the schedule as much as possible. Now, the remaining agreement through 2036, Louisville will play Notre Dame four more times. But it will be quite some time down the road. But I think that'll maximize eyeballs for the ACC, and I mean, six of those times, what out of those 12 are going to be in Death Valley, so that will be extra revenue for Clemson and for the ACC. More eyeballs on this conference, more eyeballs with rivalries involving ACC football teams is a good thing. So I like that. I instantly thought about what could a Louisville do with something like that, and then you saw kind of like the basketball program take that on with Memphis and Cincinnati. But so I love that, first of all, and I want that when people start, I guess, bemoaning Notre Dame and the football agreement with the ACC, like on the surface, I get it. Are you in or you out during COVID? I was one of those people too. I'm completely guilty of saying, listen, you have the opportunity now to really force Notre Dame's hand to join the league. They're not going to. I think that ship has sailed. But for Notre Dame in this quasi ACC membership, man, the fact that they're willing to play Clemson, to play Miami, to play Florida State several times throughout the duration of this grant of rights, I mean, that's a good thing. And, part of the reason why I think the ACC, and at least the top tier for their bowl games outside of the playoff, is pretty attractive is because of that Notre Dame tie-in. Now, at the same time, they can get up and snatch a bowl from one of those ACC members. That happened to Louisville years ago in the Music City Bowl, I believe. Notre Dame did that. But I think, too, overall, Notre Dame's never going to join a conference for football. You have them in every other sport, and you have them a guaranteed 5 games. And I do like, Josh, that with this 12-year deal, outside of those other games, like it doesn't count against what the ACC's agreement is. So sometimes you're going to play six ACC opponents when you play Clemson. That's a good thing. So the more these ACC schools can play a brand like Notre Dame, the better for the league overall, in my opinion.
No, I'm in pretty much all agreement with you. The one thing that I will say is this is one of the smarter things I've seen from the Clemson football program because now you're going to this, essentially TV viewership equals dollars model. And if you look at kind of that top, 5 to 6 of the ACC, you're from a viewership standpoint, that is, you're Clemson, Florida State,
Mhm.
Miami, Louisville, that whole
You throw
land.
North Carolina, Virginia Tech in there.
Yeah, throw them in there. But you specifically look at, Florida State, Louisville, and Clemson. They all have multi-year SEC major opponents scheduled, which will be phenomenal for TV viewership. And Clemson didn't really have that outside of their annual South Carolina game. So to be able to push this in with Notre Dame, kind of shore up their viewership just as much as you can, especially in a time like this, I think it is an amazing idea from them. And exactly like you said, with the viewership, just for the overall league and the understanding of the overall league, I think this is great. I love this. I think it is smart. I'm really happy it does not really go against your 16 model for Notre Dame. But again, I can't say enough good things. I think this is just amazing.
I mean, the more times you can have Notre Dame playing a brand like Clemson, Florida State, Louisville, instead of a Wake Forest
Yes.
or Syracuse or a Duke. I mean, sure, it's great for when Notre Dame travels to those stadiums, but then overall, what does that do for the ACC? What does that do? I mean, it does nothing besides give them losses because they're going to beat Wake Forest, they're going to beat Duke. Where if they play, the bigger brands, and I'm not including Louisville on the same tier as Clemson and Florida State, But Louisville has defeated Notre Dame twice since becoming members of the ACC within this Notre Dame partnership. So certainly, I didn't like the fact that it was on Peacock this past season. I mean, that's not going to help. Notre Dame really, or the league, kind of gauge what that viewership is. Although it was not at a home ACC football stadium, but still, overall, man, the more you can get Notre Dame playing the bigger brands, the brands of the ACC that are in the top 25, that they can either be in the playoff or at least be in the discussion for the playoff, the better for this league over.
No, yeah, absolutely. And you're talking a little bit about college football playoff. I'm sorry, this wasn't exactly on the show notes, so I'm sorry. I don't mean to blindside you.
That's fine.
I just saw that this news just came out today, though. We're going to straight seeding for the CFP 1 through 12. What are your initial thoughts on that?
I'm with you. Anything, Josh, but common sense related, man. Anything common sense related, I'm for it. I think they should have done that. And again, anytime you do something for the first time, you're going to have to tweak it. You're going to have to adjust it. And I'm glad that they're doing this. Now, I don't know if you saw in that same article, if you're talking about Ross Dellinger's piece that just came out. I do not like if they go to 16, what they're proposing with 13 to 16 and then
Yes.
14 playing 15.
Yeah.
That's dumb. What about the straight seeding? We're just talking about that. You're going to straight seed for 1 through 12 but not 1 through 16? Have the 1 play the 16, have the 2 play the 15. Let's not get too fancy or too cute, but this is another aspect of all this. Will the Big Ten and the SEC get what they want out of this? I don't know. Maybe that's a negotiation tactic because the ACC and the Big 12 don't want that 4-4-2-2-1 model. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
It very well could be. I think what you're recently seeing, the position of the SEC and the Big Ten might not be as strong as people really believe. And I know that sounds like a wild thing to say, because they essentially do hold all the cards, at least for the college football playoff standpoint.
Sure.
But you just kind of look around the league or around the country. The ACC is genuinely stable, and it's looking like it's becoming profitable for the first time in a little while. And it's in a great spot. You know, you look at I've seen conflicting reports. I saw USA Today, they put out a $711 million number. I believe I saw David Hale put out a $706 million number. I'm not sure which one exactly it is, but that's how much the ACC distributed last year. There is still obviously a gap there with the SEC and the Big Ten, but that's not as big as a gap I think that anyone was ever really thought about this would be between the two. You know, you're essentially talking $15 to $20 million per team. With the new model, Clemson and Florida State especially, they're not going to see that gap. Now, you know, your Wake Forest, that's a whole different conversation. But you're maybe top 5 to 6. You're talking about a gap of about 10 million per year per school. In my opinion, you're kind of looking in at this and you're saying, well, you know, yeah, you are making less money, but it is not an overcomable odd anymore, like some people thought it would be as short as 2 years ago.
Yeah. 100%. Well, first thing, Josh, those two numbers, I believe the 706 is what the ACC brought in 2 years ago. The 711 was what the most recent reporting was for this past year. So the league didn't make overall just $5 more million. But your point is well made. I mean, the ACC, Louisville, and again, I don't know how that works, but brought in just over 46 million. That was the highest team in the ACC. Speaking of per team, what they brought in, the SEC on average was 52.5 million, and I believe the Big Ten was like 66. Now that is before the SEC and the Big Ten deals really kick in. So next year's numbers, like you said, the gap is going to widen. However, for the top brands that are successful in the ACC, that will not be the case. So Clemson has already made the playoff. If Florida State can get their act together and make the playoff in advance, that gap will be narrowed. And then, you know, when you think about all the hemming and hawing of all these other programs that have done this, isn't the overall objective to make the playoff and to compete for a football national championship? If you have that platform with the ACC, you're still playing national brands now with Notre Dame and your other SEC counterparts. If you're making that playoff and you're in the neighborhood now, I think that was the argument that I was always making when you had Florida State and Clemson Sue, was like, yeah, if they're making 75 million and you're making 45 million every single year, 30 million plus 30 million plus 30 million, I can see the gargantuan gap that would be. But
Mhm.
now with this success initiative, and now with those other initiatives of the 5 year television ratings metric, that gap will close because Clemson and Florida State bring the eyeballs, and then if they do put their money where their mouth is and go to the playoff and advance, finish in the top 25, etc., they're going to be bringing in millions upon millions. And I don't know if you saw that on Twitter. Somebody retweeted it earlier this week, and they did some AI generic
Oh,
projections.
yeah, it was
It was
actually a friend of
88
the show.
million.
Yeah, Brian Chandler. I'm gonna link his tweet here, so you'll see that on screen. But
Very
yeah,
cool.
88 million. That's in the ballpark. That dog hunts, man.
Yeah, yeah. And so you would make more money
Yeah.
again if that hypothetical came true, and if you're competing and going far in the tournament, you absolutely would. So I think if everybody just has some patience and they take a deep breath, I am glad, Josh, that the ACC settled. I have been very at least last year or so, very, very critical of Commissioner Phillips. But I do think overall, with this settlement, you could make the argument that both sides have an argument that they won. And I think that's part of a compromise. You're going to meet in the middle a little bit. The fee to leave, I think, decreases 18 million per year until it gets to 29, 30, and then it's 75 million. That's a doable number. But if you're making 65, 70, 75 million dollars, you're not going to leave. So now again, you have to win. Where if you're in the SEC or the Big Ten, you can just exist and still have that happen. But I still think, man, if you really look at 3 or 4 years down the road, what's to say Alabama and Georgia are like, well, wait a minute, Vanderbilt, wait a minute, Mississippi State, why do you get the 75 million that we get when you're 4-8? Well,
Mhm.
wait a minute, team up the road. You're 5-7. Stoops Troops is continuing to lose ball games, and you absolutely love to see it. But why do you get the 75 million, the same 75 million that we get? Who's to say that they don't raise a stink about that years down the road to get even more money?
No, I agree, and that's at the end of the day, this is a dog eat dog world. College football, it's a business. As much as people don't want to admit it, it is a business at the end of the day, and this is just I really do think, and I agree with you. This might become standard across all the conferences.
Yeah. And
Um,
at first, Josh, I hated it. I was like,
yeah,
that's not
yeah,
fair. That's ridiculous. You're going to give Florida State and Clemson everything they want. But why should, if you're winning, like if for Louisville basketball, if we're going to a Final Four and Boston College is 15-16, we should get more money than they get. I get it. It's and then that will just motivate you even more to have all the resources necessary to be successful for those deep postseason.
absolutely. And a question I was recently on another show this past week, and I had this question, and it was, Louisville is a smaller market for college football, at least, but they always have very consistent viewership. Why is that? Well, it's because they're genuinely good at college football. That's as easy as it is. If you're good at college football, the ratings will follow. I promise. If you're going, 10-2, that 9-3 realm, you're going to be on ABC, and then from that point, the
Yeah,
ratings will follow, and it's as simple as
sure.
that. I can see in the short term, your Boston Colleges, Virginias, Wake Forests, they're not going to be happy.
No,
Uh,
no.
but I mean, at the end of the day, your power players in the league are happy with this. Um, if you look at it from just a blank statement, this is the most money Louisville's ever made in a conference.
Sure.
I'm happy.
Yeah, yeah. And they're being nationally competitive. Again, right now, sure, there's a big gap between the Big Ten and the ACC. But this past year, this past financial filing, if you will, the SEC is out in front of the ACC by what, 7.5, 8 million? That's
Mhm.
doable.
Yeah,
And now the gap is going to widen between the middle of the pack on down from the ACC compared to all of the SEC. But again, those major players, Miami's, Florida State, Clemson's, they are going to, again, they have to win and they have to advance, but they certainly have all of the chances to do just that. And then they have nobody else to blame but themselves. They can't blame the league. They can't blame television. They can't blame Commissioner Phillips. It would be on them for not winning. And again, I wouldn't be shocked at all to see the Big Ten and the SEC move to the same model as the ACC does currently.
Yeah, and a big part of this discussion that I love bringing up is I like to compare the ACC and the Big 12 a lot. And my goodness, do I feel positive about the ACC right now in that
Oh
comparison.
yeah.
Everything going on with the Big 12, obviously there's been stalls with the revenue, or not revenue sharing. There's been stalls with the private equity firm that's looked
Hmm.
to invest into the Big 12, obviously trying to make money in any way possible that they can. But the gap there from the Big 12 to the SEC is quickly widening and getting very, very big. Whereas, you look at a Louisville, for example, per this Brian Chandler tweet, I'm going to keep going back to it because it's actually pretty good info.
It is.
You got a Louisville team, they're fourth in the league. They're expected to make around $57 million. Man, your top school in the Big 12 from a viewership perspective, I would argue is probably like a Utah, somewhere around there, BYU maybe. They're not touching that. They're in that 40 million range. And at that point, it is hard to really compete, I would argue with that. You have that $40 million gap from a yearly payout perspective in comparison to 20 million. When we're talking at that $20 million gap from like a Louisville to an SEC school,
Sure. And then too, Josh, I remember, in the summer, again, I'm a conference
yeah,
realignment nerd, and you would see these, well, the Big 12 is going to pick off, they're going to poach all of these ACC schools. They don't even have a network.
no.
So, like, the ACC's infrastructure has been in place. They're in a much better standing. They have bigger brands than the Big 12 does, especially in football. So, absolutely, the ACC is the third best of the Power Four conferences. There's no argument there. Now, again, is that going to be your goal? We're number three. No, of course not. However, we have to live in the here and now, and that is being realistic. That the ACC won't touch those other two leagues. But if the big dogs are eating, that means the conference is eating and the conference is successful. And so, no matter what the playoff is, whether it's 12 or will be 16, there's going to be some years the ACC gets three teams in. And if they all advance, then that narrative goes away that the ACC are a bunch of has-beens in football. I think certainly the potential's there, the infrastructure is there. And to your point about the Big 12, sure, you have some entertaining football. I mean, it's not Pac-12 after dark anymore; it's Big 12 after dark. But the ACC with the SEC and the Big 10 was the only three power leagues that had multiple teams. The Big 12 had just one with Arizona State. Now that was a hell of a game that Arizona State and Cam Skadaboo played in. Man, I was glued to that one. That was fantastic football. But right there, right then and there, the ACC has shown some separation there in the first college football playoff, the expanded one, I should say, that they got more teams in. And overall, I think what the payouts for the Big 12 range between 43 and 38 million. Well, the highest paid Big 12 school was the lowest paid school in the ACC. So there's already a gap there. It will only continue with the ACC network. I think I saw a projection where roughly $4 to $5 million increases per year going through 2030. So that will continue to widen that gap between that other conference.
Exactly. And you talked about the three teams in the college football playoff. I don't know if Louisville exactly, or not Louisville. I don't know if the ACC puts in exactly three teams again this year. But we recently did our post spring top 25 on our page, and just looking at the Big 12 from a pure football standpoint this season, it wouldn't surprise me again if they're a one bid league. And I don't think it would
Yeah.
really surprise anyone. I mean, you have BYU, who is a very competent team. They're going to be a preseason top 15 team. But outside of that, it's that typical Big 12 thing where it's a lot of everyone else in between at,
Sure.
that 8-4, 9-3 range. What do we
Hmm.
do with these? Whereas you look at the ACC, you have, Clemson. I think they're one of the best teams in the country. Miami, they're obviously it's Cristobal, so you never know. Uh,
That's a
it's
nice way to put it.
you never know how to go. Again, SMU, they're extremely portal heavy. Rhett Lashley, he's one of the better coaches in the ACC. I'll argue that till
Oh,
the
yeah.
day I die. Louisville, another good top 25 program. And then I know they play a hell of a schedule this year, but Georgia Tech's going to be good,
Oh, yeah.
man. They have a
Yeah.
very difficult schedule. I will give them that. Very difficult. But just comparing those two leagues, I look at the ACC. You have what I just listed off four teams
Yeah.
with realistic top 25 aspirations. The Big 12, maybe one, maybe
Exactly.
two.
If you put the ACC top five against the Big 12 top five, I mean, 4-1, the ACC goes. I mean, like, so Clemson to BYU. I mean, who wins on a neutral field? I would say Clemson.
Yeah.
Same thing, Miami and
Texas
what?
Tech.
Tech. Okay,
Yep.
I'm going with Miami, and then same thing, Louisville.
Probably
I mean,
Arizona State, I would assume.
yeah, yeah, and then I know the Sun Devils lost a lot after this past season that had a magical run. I would go with Louisville there. So you just go on down the list there. Now the Big 12 is super entertaining. Don't get me
Oh, it
wrong,
is.
but 8-4 and 9-3 is not going to get you in the playoff.
Nope, unless you have three letters next to your name and you are playing, I would argue, probably about five top 25 teams in a six-span week in the SEC. I don't think it gets you
Yeah,
there.
yeah, you're right.
But no, I think I would say this feels like this is the most stable the ACC has been in a long time. I would argue.
I would argue alongside you. It was interesting because someone asked Phillips that at the closing of the ACC meetings, Josh, and he said, and I was a little surprised to be honest with you. He said 3 to 5 years we expect to be stable. So I'll go in the middle. I'll say 4, but I think the quicker that these power brands win, the quicker they see the fruits of that financial windfall, and they're like, well, wait a minute. If we want to pay the $75 million to go to the SEC, and who knows? Let's be honest. Who knows if that invite even comes? Why would the SEC want to split that pie even more ways? And then does ESPN that already owns the ACC property? Why would they? That's the argument I make on LSL all the time. Why would ESPN green light? Okay, Clemson, sure, you can go to the SEC. We already own your rights for less money that we would have to pay you in the SEC. South Carolina, of course, would not want you there. Now, could the Big Ten come calling? I think that's a lot of that would be a bigger question for Florida State and Clemson, two states that the Big Ten is obviously not in. But that could be for another day. But
Mhm.
overall, man, once they see that financial windfall, I really think they're going to be, we need to stay put. Unless the Big Ten and the SEC just want to gobble it up, and we're like an NFL light type of situation. But again, I don't think we go that drastic. But to answer your question, I think the ACC is stable, as stable as it's ever been, and I think we're going to see that until for a good 4 to 5 years before we see any potential changes going forward.
Yeah, I think the big thing, the hemming and hollering over the past few years. Obviously, your Clemson, Florida State delegation. I think those days are over now. As an inverse, I do think you could see a little bit of a outcry of sorts from, and I don't mean to call anyone out in particular, but your Wake Forest, your Boston Colleges of the world. That
Yeah.
could be a thing, but at this point, man, you got to let the big boys make. You got to invest in football.
Yeah.
It's on yourself, like exactly like you said.
That's one of the most intriguing aspects of all this, man. When you talk about what happens in 4 or 5 years from now, there's going to be schools. I think we're going to see that in the next year or two. They're going to cut sports, and then
Yes.
after that, as painful as that's going to be, will they have a home in the ACC? Will they be able to compete? I'm sure they're going to want that. They're going to want the paycheck. But if you're Boston College or Wake Forest and you're 3-9, 4-8 every year, you're not selling out your stadium. You don't give your fans a lot of hope. That's going to, you're not selling the tickets. That's going to impact you negatively as well. So I'm interested to see in about another 5 years or so, are there programs in these power leagues that have to just bite the bullet and be like, hey, man, like, we cannot compete consistently at this level, and we're going to have to look elsewhere. Maybe you drop your football program to an independent and you keep the rest of your sports in the ACC. I don't know, but the ACC too, you would think would go for that. You think if hypothetically Wake Forest and Boston College say we can't compete, well, okay, so we'll just stay at 15 now for football, and then everybody else gets even more money. So, I don't know. That's what I'm going to be watching for, though, around 2030. Will their teams be jettisoned from these leagues just because they can't compete financially or on the field they're on?
Yeah, the one thing I would say to watch right now, obviously I do a lot more of the NIL specific content on this page. And the house settlement I could talk for, 10 hours about and go in circles. What I would love to see from SEC or ACC spring meetings last week, is a little bit of clarity on, is the ACC going to be one of the leagues that forces its members to do the full 20.5 million, because the full 20.5 million is not, you don't have to opt into it. You can opt into whatever you can afford, essentially. You're going to see that very much at the G5 FCS level. Those programs simply, they just can't afford the $20 million expenditure. Um, because I've heard rumblings from my side that there are a few ACC schools that have said, well, hey, what if we only did 16 million or 17 million? Is the entire ACC going to allow that? And then obviously you get into the new enforcement arm that's being discussed for, the rev share and all the whole house settlement, which again, 10-hour conversation in itself. But is that going to require these members of the P4 leagues to do this as well? Because that could very easily see teams have to drop down, because they, at that point, exactly like you just said, they couldn't stay competitive.
Yeah, that's a great angle, man. I think my gut says that yes, at first they're going to allow it, but does that in turn expedite their downfall? You know
Uh-huh.
what I mean? Because will they miss out on the number of elite athletes that they can bring into their programs of football and men's basketball? I mean, certainly too. I mean, if you're short $3 to $4 million compared to your peers, what sports are you, kind of cutting out of there? Or, how many athletes can you spend? You can get your quarterback, but can you get a pair of running backs along with that? That type of money, that type of gap could certainly be detrimental to those teams. But I think more or less like, hey, this is what, everybody else is doing the 20 and a half. If you can only swing 17, cool. But, if you start seeing that impact you on the field and on the court, maybe there's a little bit more pressure going forward. Perhaps that's, if a fan base sees their program struggling, the fan base will step up a little bit more. But Josh, to be honest with you, man, the NIL in this space right now, I just do not see it. I don't see this continuing like this. I don't think you can continue to have your big time donors give millions and millions every single year continuously. I don't think that this model will continue. In five years from now, I don't think that we're doing this exact same thing. So we'll see what happens there. But I feel like it's not sustainable how it is right now. But with the NCAA being so inept and not getting out in front of this NIL stuff, now you do have pay for play going on, but you also have this enforcement arm. So let's see if we can, again, compromise and meet in the middle and not have it being like so much wild, wild west, but still have the players grab that bag. I'm all
Mhm.
for players making that money, but like let's do this reasonably, and then maybe that'll help. That'll be for the greater good of college athletics, no matter the sport.
No, I definitely agree with you. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to get too off topic talking about NIL. I know it's kind of the thing for my page. When we want to talk about stuff, then when just NIL comes up, we start talking about NIL. So sorry. But the
Don't be.
biggest
I'm here for it too, man.
the biggest thing that's going to change all this is the clearinghouse. That's going to come online with RevShare. So with the clearinghouse, anything over 600 has to get reviewed. And there was something really interesting that happened in ACC spring meetings last week. I believe it's Delotti, if I'm saying that right, the clearinghouse. They spoke to the ACC ADs, chancellors, and presidents. And I believe the number was something like 90% of deals that would have been done from a publicly owned company to a player, good to go, completely
Yeah.
fine in the year 2024, at least from the data that they had. Only, I believe the number, and I'm trying to pull it up real quick, so I apologize.
I want to say it was 70% would have
70,
been
yeah,
denied
yeah, 70
from
would have been
like.
denied from a collective.
Mhm.
And then I you read about this. I can't remember the kid's is the 5-star offensive tackle that just committed to Miami, but you're talking about these high school kids coming out of high school. They're making, Jackson Cantwell. There we go. This Jackson Cantwell commitment, for example, he got $0.4 million out of high school. Well,
Wow.
when you're going with this new clearinghouse, you're essentially proving these based off of a fair market value, I believe is the terminology used. How can you say that is fair market value for a 17-year-old kid that's not going to, because you have current offensive tackle starters that are all Americans that aren't making that much.
Yeah.
So I really think what you'll see is you're going to see the initial cost of high school athletes go down. You might see collectives a little less involved. And then you might see, your pre-established players
Uh-huh.
making more money, which is probably the way that should be.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think too, if you can get to a place where players that have proven themselves at this level can make the most money. Now,
Mhm.
so you're gonna have like your superstar, like a Cooper Flag or whatever, that's going to command a big number. But an offensive lineman coming out of high school, I mean, is he even going to start for Miami? And you're going to give him that much money to what, redshirt?
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense. And even if he doesn't redshirt, you're going to have some growing pains in a power conference coming right out of high school. You just are. So that's what I like, though. That's what I like about this clearinghouse is like, well, wait a minute. He's not. Let's have a ballpark here for position groups, how old players are, what the market is paying, because we never know. I mean, yeah, so and so's making $5 million. Do we know that for sure? No, we don't. Carson Beck in Miami. I've heard several different numbers for that. Who knows how much he's getting paid? But let's compare quarterbacks to quarterbacks. Let's compare quarterbacks who played at the power conference level that's transferring to another power league, or let's compare G6 quarterbacks before, if they're at Coastal Carolina and are transferring to a power league, they're not. I mean, how much are they worth? I think the sooner we can get to assessing fair market value, the better, and it's going to be better for everybody: collectives, schools, players themselves. They're going to know what they're worth, and they're not going to have anybody trying to rip anybody off.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't have said it any better myself, honestly. Bumping around topics though, so I'm sorry to keep, we're doing the pinball banging around
Hey
on
man,
different
it's all
things.
good.
What do you think the ACC looks like in 5 years?
This is a very tough question. Can you ask me in 5 years? No. I think the ACC will stay intact. And by intact, I'm saying I think the major brands will stay intact. I think if you said who's more likely to leave, Clemson or Boston College, I'm going to go with Boston College because they're simply not going to be able to maintain competitiveness consistently. I think it'll take a little bit of patience. I agree with Jim Phillips when he said I think everybody just needs to settle down for a couple of years. Let's see where the chips fall. And like we said at the beginning of the show, I mean, there's going to be situations where Clemson and Florida State are going to make the playoff. Miami's going to make the playoff. If they advance, they're going to get that much more money, and then they're going to be in the neighborhood of a league that they were rumored to want to be a part of anyways. I think with that component of you're going to have to win. It's not like you're a Vanderbilt. You can just sit there and chill out and still collect a big check. That's the different part. But by the time that 5 year timeline is up, who's not to say, like we mentioned earlier, that the SEC and the Big Ten don't go to the same type of payment model that the ACC is going. But to answer your question, I think the ACC will be intact, and I think the UNC, Miami, Florida State, Clemson, all of those schools rumored for the other big two out of the Power Four are they're staying put in that 5 year span.
I agree. The one thing I will say, I no info on this at all. It wouldn't surprise me if the ACC might be, if not a little bit bigger, might have shuffled some teams.
Mm-hmm.
I just everything going on in the Big 12 land right now, it doesn't get as much publicity as the other three leagues. But especially in this, you start talking about this, oh my goodness, I keep forgetting the term, private equity. I really think it might drive a team or two out. And it might not even be a team's, choice, but just certain state laws with investing private equity into state funded institutions is kind of an automatic no player for certain schools.
So are you saying that you feel like ACC schools would leave for the Big 12, or the Big 12 schools would leave?
I feel like maybe a few Big 12 schools might start really seriously looking at the ACC. Yeah. Because I mean, you look at it, just on ballpark. Let's say you're gonna make, I don't know, $43 million a year, just ballpark number in the ACC. Uh, Big 12, you're not making that, and you don't have
Nope.
the option to make more potentially. Take a West Virginia for example. A West Virginia, very good fan base, very good viewership. Well, good relatively viewership. Uh, Go on one good year, you're talking the difference of $20 million, man. You
Yeah,
know,
that's a
uh,
big number.
yeah, exactly. But I'm more so I'm just very interested to see what happens in the bottom, the bottom quarter of the conference of the ACC. Because if like you said, if teams do leave, that's just more money in the pot, man.
And then that 5 year span too is like what the media rights deals are up. I think it's for the Big Ten, right? And the Big
Yes.
12.
Yes.
So does the ACC get aggressive after that 5 year span and try to poach the best brands in the Big 12? Who knows? Do they want to get that big? They might not. If they have an exodus of some teams that can't compete, do you backfill with some Big 12 targets? Who knows?
Yeah, and speaking of that, the media right deal, it's kind of shocking to me with the Big 12 that, I believe there's 3 years out, if I'm not mistaken. I would have to double check, but I believe it's three. I'm so interested to see if they go to a Fox only deal because I think that is a big teller if they do. The fact that they don't have a studio at Charlotte yet. I don't know if you know this, the
Yeah.
SEC network is also based out of Charlotte. It was wild information to me. I didn't know that until like a week ago. But the fact they don't have their own dedicated network, I know they have the Big 12 Plus or whatever it's called on ESPN
Yeah,
Plus.
nobody. Yeah,
Yeah, but
that's
it's
lame.
it's streaming.
Yeah.
I'm very interested if they go to Fox only because I think that's a big teller. The at ESPN at the end of the day, they have a great array of content throughout. The SEC, ACC. They have majority of the G6 leagues, at least the ones that matter. So yeah, just very very interesting stuff happening. But luckily, the ACC, I don't feel like we have to worry that much about it, especially Louisville.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. We're in a good spot, man. We're in a good
Yeah.
spot. I think the best case scenario for Louisville is for the ACC to remain relevant and intact. I think that is the best case scenario. And, as of right now, listen, I think for the next 5 years or so, we're good. Once those media rights deals open up, we'll see what happens. But again, I think if the big dogs have been national players and raking in that dough, then I think it's all going to be a moot point in terms of switching the leagues. And again, who's to say that the invitations are even there? The leagues are, everybody's bloated enough. The Big Ten has way more than 10 teams. The Big 12 has way more than 12 teams. The ACC has 18 outside of football. I know everybody, I love talking about it. You love talking about it, but like, it comes to a point, it's like, okay, man, we have 16, 18, 17 mouths to feed. Enough's enough. Well, travel is going to eat up costs, especially when you have Cal and Stanford in the ACC. I mean, I can only imagine. They're only getting 30% of the share as well. So, but that's another point we failed to mention when you talk about the next payout for the expansion teams. It's been well documented. SMU is not taking any money from that tier one deal. And then Cal and Stanford are taking just 30%. So that all goes into the pot and divvied up between the 15, 14 other teams in the ACC. That's going to be even more money this time next year when we see that reporting.
Absolutely. But the one big thing that is happening for Louisville in the next 5 years, we're getting a new sponsorship agreement with Adidas.
Oh yeah. Oh, let's talk about it. As I wear my old school cut, net worth shirt for the 2013 championship with a Nike swoosh on it. Yep.
Yeah. So I believe our deal does it run out in 27,
June 28th.
28, 28. In very interesting news of that, typically it's not something you would think about talking about. But there's a current rumor going around that Adidas approached Tennessee for Tennessee to come back to Adidas. They're offering $200 million for 10 years. Do you think that's something similar you'll see for Louisville in 28?
I think the something similar we'll see for Louisville is the deal that we have currently in place back in 2016. Of course, Louisville and Adidas agreed to a 10-year, $160 million apparel deal. At the time, that was the most lucrative in the nation. Now, I believe Louisville is third behind Ohio State and Texas. But yeah, I think Louisville gets somewhere around that number. I don't think they would eclipse the $20 million mark. And I think if you take a step back and you kind of assess the landscape, I mean, what leverage does Louisville have, even if they take it on the open market? I mean, Nike, Jordan brand, they're not going to pay Louisville anywhere close to $16 million a year in product or cash. So I think Louisville, I'm with you. I think Louisville sticks with Adidas. I think it's going to be another long-term deal. The relationship has been mutually beneficial. I know it doesn't have the allure that the swoosh does. We're never going to compete with the Jordan brand or the Jordan shoe. But what you do have is exclusivity. And when you only have 13, 14 of the Power Four, you have the ability to really develop some cool uniforms for a variety of your programs, and you have more input. At Nike, Louisville would be just another school. But with Adidas, they're one of the major players of that brand, and it is an elite brand of its own. It's the number two brand in the world next to Nike. So in Europe, it's number one. So Adidas has been a great partner. I get it. For those out there listening, and Louisville needs to go to Nike. It's just simply in the NIL era, man. It was always a very slim shot, but it's slim to none now because Louisville's not going to turn down another revenue stream from an apparel partner. Again, if Nike wanted to do that, it's going to be a fraction of the 16 million that Louisville gets annually.
Yeah, and the one thing I will bring up about this that I like to look at from my viewpoint, I know college basketball is completely different than college football when it comes to, shoe deal affiliation and all that stuff for, high school recruits. But if you've looked recently, Adidas has gotten involved in NIL for their programs, uh, specifically with retaining players. And players already on rosters, they don't really get involved in luring kids to Adidas schools. That's not a thing. But if you have a Tyler Shuck, for example, Adidas will pay that player to represent Adidas, which as they should, I would argue.
Yeah.
So it's a great thing. I think it's a great thing going. I agree. I don't think you eclipse 200 million. I don't see it for Louisville. But if you get a bump off of 160, it wouldn't surprise me.
Sure.
But I think it's a very good sign for Louisville, and just stay away from Nike. You're just going to be Red Kentucky at the end of the day. Uh,
And a lot of people, Josh, I was surprised to see people not wanting Tennessee to potentially eclipse Louisville. Like the more brands under the Adidas family, the better. I
mhm.
mean, you've got Kansas, you've got Miami, you've got Washington, you've got Nebraska, Indiana. You've already got some big brands on there. If you can bring in Tennessee, that's good for the Adidas brand. I mean, I think that would be a good thing. And it's not like we see any of the money. It helps the athletic department. It helps the players. I never understood when people are like, we're the most profitable program in the country. Well, yeah, because you pay the season tickets and the donations. I mean, we're bragging because you pay the most money. I mean, the Card Nation's awesome, but
Yeah.
there's also stuff too. The media rights money. It's great to talk about Louisville bringing in 46.4, but we're not going to see any of it. And I'm not like we should, but that's just kind of been always funny to me when we talk about, the revenue streams and how much money you bring in there. It's like, we're arguing over it, SEC honks and stuff. It's like, well, we're still not going to touch any of that. We're just talking about what our school makes.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, just
Yeah.
go to the college football playoff, man. Go to the
Yep.
Final
Yeah.
Four.
Yes. That's all. That's more than it's worth more than tens of millions of dollars.
For the Tennessee Adidas deal, one thing I have seen, a lot of Tennessee fans aren't super excited for it because
Not online, dude. Nobody is. It's crazy.
Adidas had some truly awful uniforms for Tennessee
They did.
about 10
They
years
did.
ago. The
They
smoke
did.
gray, and I just
Well,
but
but it's
hey,
been so much better, right? I mean, I
yeah.
really truly like Louisville football's uniforms. I like
Mhm.
Louisville's basketball uniforms. I'm glad they got away from the stupid cummerbund. Remember that on the shorts for
Yeah.
basketball there for a stretch. But I loved Louisville's basketball uniforms this past season and the variety of the uniforms we saw. And then football, man, that is a clean look. You got the wings on the shoulder pads. Louisville script is on point. I love it, man. Again, I think if the Tennessee fans had some patience and if they end up going with Adidas, they're going to see, man, that it's the brand has drastically improved from the last time.
Yeah, and one thing I always bring up, I don't know if you any other apparel deals if you follow those. It's always better than Fanatics if you've been following any of the NHL apparel deal fiasco for the past 2 years now.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
remember Major League Baseball had a thing with it too. It was it was so cheaply made and it looked cheap. That would be an issue with
no,
Adidas. They had
no.
those tire tread. Remember those tire tread looking football
Yep.
uniforms a decade ago? They've changed the stitching and the fabric and that. It's a very very clean and slick look. If Tennessee does sign with Adidas, I think they're going to be very very happy with.
Yeah. So final thoughts or final little thing that I want to talk about. Again, I kind of said it earlier. It's a 10-hour conversation. We don't have to have a full 10-hour conversation over this, but there's some rumblings of a potential new Power 4 enforcement arm for NIL, specifically for RevShare. And it is outside outside of NCAA control. It's more so controlled by the individual institutions and the conferences. Any initial thoughts on that? I know info is a little scarce on it.
The more we can get away from the NCAA organizing and being the governing body, the better.
Mhm.
We need to get back to common sense type of rulings that comes from what are the rules in the first place? How are you going to enforce them? And then stop with the stupid nonsense, like the Ali Khalifa stuff, for example. Like, number one, let's use some common sense. You've allowed players for 6, 7, 8 years eligibility in the past. You should have already allowed this. And then two, if you're going to make a ruling and it's appealed, we should know by now. Look at his transcript. What is he doing? He's gotten his bachelor's. He's working on his master's. He's had two. He had a significant knee injury last year. Yes, he had a red shirt. Just look at the facts before you and make the common sense ruling. He should be eligible. It is ridiculous that it's gone on past a week. I mean, seriously, look at the case. Look at the body of work. Look what he's accomplishing in the classroom. And if the NCAA truly lives up to their word of being for the student athlete, look no further than Ali Khalifa. The kid's working on his master's degree, and he had to get there was like a hole in his knee cartilage or something. He had to get repaired, so he had to have taken a medical red shirt. And if you want to take some extra time to look at it just to make sure, fine. But let's get back to common sense rulings. I'm all for this new governing arm. Anything that can take power away from the NCAA and in turn get us to hang those banners and restore those records, all the better, from my view.
The one thing I keep going back to, and first off, I apologize. I do not mean to get political, but it's inherently somewhat of a political topic, so I'm
Uh-huh.
sorry. Um, at the end of the day, we're talking about millions of dollars going from taxpayer-funded institutions into private hands, essentially. I would love to see some sort of legislation or guidelines, even at the state level or the federal level, just to kind of shore this up a little bit, so we're not constantly fighting court cases with rev share. And that's very prevalent in the Title IX, execution of it, which that's a whole nother conversation. But just some sort of legislation potentially, especially now you have these states like Tennessee that are,
Oh yeah.
signing these new NIL laws. Um, Again, I saw On Three post an article this week. Tennessee's not getting kicked out of the SEC. I just want to throw that out there. They're not going anywhere for their state laws. Um, but it's a good thing. I get everyone on the same page for the most part. Keep it out of the NCAA. They've been incompetent on everything NIL in the past 10 years. The reason we're in this mess is because of their incompetence and lack
Yep.
of action, in my opinion. Uh, but yeah, just a little bit of legislation just to kind of get some rules set in place. I'd be very happy.
Well, I think too. Let's go ahead and make the college athletes employees. I think
Yeah.
if you do that, and then you minimize the legal battles, and it evens the playing field for all parties involved. We know what we're dealing with. Listen, are they going to class? Yes. Is it still college? Yes. But this is also NBA light. It's
Mhm.
NFL 2.0. I mean, it really is. And so the quicker that we fully embrace that aspect of it, the better. And again, I think the quicker you embrace that aspect of it, that's less interaction that you're going to have with the NCAA. And
Mhm.
again, they have shown time and time again that they're inept and they are not equipped for this. And just, I think the power conferences that, the quicker they can get a hold of this, the better. And so, you saw that they just kind of rammed NIL down the NCAA's throat. Like, we're going to do this. You refuse to lead. You just want to whine to Congress to help you. We're going to do this. This is where the direction is going. And of course, when the NCAA took anything to court, they lost.
Yep.
So, I mean, hopefully common sense prevails. I think it will. Maybe it takes a little bit longer than we all want, but I still think in the end, common sense will win out. But then again, let's classify the student athletes as employees as far as the NIL aspect of it is concerned. They're going to get paid. Let's treat them as employees, and then everything else will kind of fall into place.
Well said. Well said. Well, Ethan, where can we find you at? I know you have a very popular radio show. If I'm not mistaken, 10 plus years, right?
Yeah, man. So we celebrated our, what is this, the 13th anniversary this past September. So we're teenagers now. So yeah, every Wednesday at 7 o'clock on 93.9 The Ville, you can catch us, and then of course on Twitter at Elville Sports without an O live. So we're obviously Louisville centric, and you can check us out there. We're in the summer doldrums, but generally, Josh, as I'm sure you're well aware, there's never a dull moment with Louisville athletics, and there's always a talking point somewhere.
I genuinely mean this. I'm not trying to gas you up. LSL is by far the best radio content for Louisville.
No, thank you, sir. You're very
It is
kind to say that.
by far the best in my opinion. But yeah, thank you so much, Ethan, for the regular viewership. Thank you for tuning in. We, as always, we have our great baseball and football content coming your all's way. Please check us out on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for giving us a little bit of time, and have a great day.
Appreciate it, Josh. Thanks, man.